Heideggerian worldliness and analytic theory of continental anti-Cartesianism. Here's the outline. I'll first talk about historicity, something that's very continental, and Heideggerian notion of understanding, and especially in interaction with Gadamer, prejudices. And then I'll talk about horizon, and especially as a projection of possibilities of Dasein. And then I will talk about nothingness, having distinguished worldliness and worldhood, which the latter word is the word used by John Macquarie and Edward Robinson to translate Weltlichkeit. So here's historicity in the Weltsein, being in the world. Contextualism, so consider the following, because it's commonsensical that we understand things in context and we make assertions in pragmatic context. So, but we understand each other given some prior commitment, and Hans-Georg Gadamer talks about the Urteil, prejudice translated as, and that's Heidegger's Struktur des Verstehens, so for structure of understanding, and that in analytic philosophy we can understand it as presupposition, which is very simple. Presuppositions, when it's common knowledge that a certain thing be in a certain way, then those things being that way constitute a common ground. So presupposition interacts in with assertion and communication through common ground, and we can understand that as belief, especially those are prior beliefs, because when we make assertions, we will update our beliefs, even transmit information and update our knowledge. So of course, there are some times that we only presume certain thing, and that's a prior pretense. We suppose a certain thing, like Descartes, René Descartes, when he, well, or maybe even when we discuss skepticism in the classroom, we suppose that we don't know that there's an external world, and go on with a presumption and see what comes out of it. So that's a contextualism, and we see that how we understand depends on situation, and of course how we are depends on our history. So that's contextualism, and a dogmatism that I think the term originates from Jim Pryor about perception. So roughly put, it's an anti-KK epistemology on which one could know something without knowing that one knows. Phenomenon. So there are certain things, certain phenomena, certain things being a certain way, and we acquire evidence about those facts, and we understand the phenomenon, the fact, through explaining the data that we collected. This is a very scientific way of thinking about how we make inquiries, and we make inference to the best explanation, the best theory to explain the data, the conceivable theories at a certain time. And if we stumble upon, because we don't always know that we have exhausted all alternative explanation, and that's one way in which we could have known without knowing that we know, because we haven't ruled out all other alternatives as epistemically possible true theory. So, and let alone that we haven't worked out all possible theories. So that's dogmatism, which you see is compatible with the contextualism and even the understanding of hermeneutics using prejudice. So, well, Thomas with Heidegger, Gegebenheit, we are thrown into the world without choices among certain things, and our temporality, Zeitlichkeit, how we are given at a certain time, the zeitgeist, there are commitment, prior commitment that we have. We believe a certain thing, maybe they constituted knowledge, even if we don't have proof that they are. And we do a certain Norothian bootstrap because we don't want to destroy the whole boat while we're sailing. We have to understand the world, keep sailing, and revise bits and pieces of the boat. And so we have to start somewhere instead of a Cartesian project, hoping to start with a first principle, but it doesn't make it, yeah, it is epistemically a holism, but in the end, the world is the foundation because we build everything based on the world. Even though epistemically, we have to get into understanding it through bits and pieces, starting somewhere. And that's how we could have an ontology that's not confirmed. We can have existence that are that we don't know that they do exist. So that's how I understand Heidegger's existential ontology. So understanding circle in device, the how we come to know a certain thing, having presupposed something. So semantically, we presupposed what the text, the semantics of the text, and let's say the reference of certain word, and of course the meaning of certain phrases. And I think meaning is constituted by reference because it is through referring to certain things that a certain, let's say, description has a certain meaning. So the semantic, and well, while we read a text, we form hypotheses and test our hypothesis. Having read part of the text, we form a hypothesis about what the author is saying. We try to understand the author's mind, his original intent. And having formed some hypothesis, we go on and reading and hopefully get to the whole, and we will have a more complete picture about whether our hypotheses are confirmed. Because at least having read a few, we have some idea about what the author is thinking, is trying to say, but afterwards, maybe we will encounter other paragraphs that are contrary to our hypothesis. It's confirmed what we think the author is saying. So that is one, a hermeneutic that try to get at the author's intent. And that's one thing. Of course, we want to get involved with the world. We want to understand the world, and it's on the author's authority, epistemic authority, that, well, given his expertise, his sincerity, that he's not lying, he's been honest, and he knows about what he's, the part of the world that he's describing. So through understanding the author, we will come to understand the world better. So that the epistemic presupposition about what the author knows will make a difference to how we work out what he meant in his pragmatic context, because sometimes we use words that refer to a certain thing, and we refer to those things under the guise that we know them. So it doesn't, sometimes it is restricted to the situation relative to how the certain phenomenon is described, and we have to know how the author relates epistemically to the phenomenon. So because how he knows certain thing rely on how he describes it. So and here's how we have testimonial knowledge through assertion based on the author's authority and our trust, our justified trust in the author, then we can come to know the world through an author that knows. So of course, not everyone who writes knows. Sometimes they read about their experience, or they write about the world through their own perspective, and then that's a way in which we understand the author's world, and to sympathize, to experience the author's lived experience, and to empathize with the author. In any case, the author witnessed the world through his eyes. Even if there are things that he got wrong, it is still his testimony still constitute a witness of the world, even if there are some description. And this pluralism brings out something about, because let's say Gadamer, he objects a kind of scientific objectivity, but it doesn't imply that he's a relativist, and even a pluralism. Let's say a humanity that embraces human rights. It could be it could hold across all culture, but it manifests itself differently. It's like a Chinese enjoy eating rice and Indian enjoy eating naan, something like that. So because we're living in the same world, and humanity is the same way. So there is still an objectivity, even if we talk about cultural differences, and there's something that underlies all this. So we understand others' culture, understand others' mind. Sometimes the authors do not know, sometimes they do. And even if the world, the social world, the world constituted are different, it is still something that we know through getting into the hermeneutic circle correctly. So of course, Heidegger talks about horizon, to hand height. Well, you'll see how it relates to possibilities later on, because I talk about how different culture people are having constituted worlds that are different. Of course, we live in the same world, but relative to certain culture with certain convention, social norm, there are things that are construction dependent. It could make a difference to experience, to their lived experience, and whether certain feelings do have the significance that those in the culture think they do. It's an open question, but at least it is through their convention that mutually they do a certain thing, following a certain convention, doing certain things in a way that they agree to through in solidarity, through mutual respect. They follow the convention willingly and knowingly, and that kind of sociality, the corresponding feeling that they have that are different, contrast a allegedly putatively sociality that's in fact inauthentic and Uneigentlichkeit. Because if you want to, let's say, be social with the Das Man, they and join with their idle talk, then you don't get involved with others, the world, in a way that's an authentic mode of being through mutual respect. It's again, that's something that Heidegger thematized, and whether Das Man constituted a society, whether their version of sociality is anything at all good, that's what Heidegger disagrees with. So Dasein, future, they Dasein projects its possibilities and different situation, and even Dasein's different makeup, we would have a different horizon and project different sets of possibilities. And of course, that's again another way to understand Dasein. That's a human being that is with self-respect. He knows what he is, and he accepts himself as he is, and he treats himself in a Kantian term as an end in itself, and doesn't treat himself as mere means to do things that he doesn't want to for others' approval, as in the case of joining the Das Man. So, and Sein Können, which is translated as potentiality for being, that's one thing. And there are other cases in which one annihilated that possibility when one is no longer able to become someone that can project possibilities. So that's the fallen, the fall, when someone joins the crowd, the herd, the mad crowd, and the Das Man, and loses one's authenticity, and one is alienated from one's authentic self and Fremdung. So these are, and of course, that's when one doesn't act on self-respect. One is treating one as a mere means just to please others, to please the herd. And of course, when someone, well, for Heidegger, he later on talk about death and mortality and angst. It's through angst, Dasein's knowing one's own situation, that one will begin, well, to through Sorge, which is constituted by, well, sich Vorwegsein, getting ahead of oneself. And I understood, because now you know what one is, and you want to be better. And that betterness, of course, one is not yet that good. So I understand that engagement with the world, knowing one's situation, knowing what one did, where one is, and through, well, the translation is care or concern, through Sorge, one will hope to increase one's possibilities through doing better. And the Hegelian understanding of this way of becoming, sublation of Hebung, well, becoming better, because usually people talk about a contradiction, because if you describe your present state and your future better state as atemporally without indexing the description to a time, so the two descriptions of the same person cannot be both true. For example, I'm unfit and I hope to be fit, and I can't be both fit and unfit. And through solving, sublating this contradiction, I would have become better. And to think ahead of myself, and through caring about my own situation, and I will, in hope, I will improve myself, Dasein, engaging in the world. And that betterment, of course, involves an increase in power. Through one doing better, acquiring certain skills with objects in the world, there are many things you can do with it. Not only thinking about it, and increasing possibilities with certain objects, and of course that situation that makes a difference to how many things you can do, the possibilities. And so power interacts these two things through possibilities. So and people with different horizon, of course, horizon, we talk about understanding, interpretation, but how we understand the world makes a difference to how we engage with it. So So here's lastly the Seinsfrage, the question of being and nothingness. Of course, I talk about how Heidegger mentioned being towards death when Dasein realized what he is through self-disclosure. It knows that, well, death is constituted by an annihilation of possibilities. So one is no longer able to project possibilities, and one knows it, and one, again, the translation is anxiety, one is in angst or fear. So through self-disclosure, and that's one important thing. That's because things that are concealed, and it's through the disclosure of what Dasein is that one is in angst and wants to do things differently, and know, of course, that disclosed one's limit. That there will be a time at which one has no worldlessness, because that's in death, one is no longer, or at least not concrete with life, with a living body, and that worldlessness and annihilation of possibilities is a way I understand the difference between worldhood and worldliness, because one could still be alive without alternatives, and there's another situation in which one isn't even alive. So if being dead is a way in which one doesn't have a world, then it makes a difference to whether one has a world without having any possibility. So externalism, because when we talk about disclosure, concealment, and the world is prior to the mind and the knowing mind, and the world is concealed to us. There are unknown truths, of course, and the horizon, how the horizon is modified, how we engage with the world and how it updates itself is through disclosure, disclosed fact. We know more about things, and of course, deontically, we also, after having acquired certain skills, we can do more things as well. So it also changes the horizon, and that understanding relates to an absolutism and externalism. That's the Hegelian absolute that we can see a part of, and the epistemic possibilities of what it is. And it outruns our finitude, because even if the absolute is only completely comprehensible by an infinite mind, we can refer to infinity without having completely described it. So that is already an both semantic and epistemic externalism that's from the analytic tradition. So lastly, because I distinguished worldlyhood and worldliness and worldhood, now to think about thinghood, that's again something that Heidegger focused on. If to understand things using a object property understanding. So object instance the property. So what it is to be a thing? Well, when it's an object in the world. And of course, we can also use a first order practical logic to understand object and property, but that's a description and the metaphysics of thinghood, existence. And so being, if being object in the world, that's one way to understand thinghood, and being will simply be constituted by belonging to the world, right? So what it is to be, well, to be in the world, to belong to the world. So, but then if we go back to think about what essence is, what essence, whatever, when something is an essence of a certain object, then it is the necessary constituent, because logically, if you know the necessary constituent, you know the necessary condition of certain thing through contrapositive, because let's say I am a human being, so and necessarily, and it's also necessary condition that I'm a human being. And the contrapositive is if something is not a human being, then it's not me. It's something else. So if you have the necessary condition, then through the contrapositive, logically, you can generate mentally its absence. So if we know the essence of being, then we're able to mentally generate something like, well, nothingness. And if nothingness is when there's no world, because the world is on an object understanding of things, it's still an object because the world is also something that we can quantify it over. So that's a way to understand why we can't interrogate being intellectually, because it outruns our cognitive capacity. It's inconceivable. So this is a quote from Heidegger. From manifestly, you have long been aware of what you mean when you use the expression being. We, however, who used to think we understood it, have now become perplexed. So here's a summary. So I go in with historicity. I think that's maybe at least since Hegel, that we, when we do philosophy, we focused more on the history and understanding how there are prejudices and how understand it using presupposition, and horizon in interaction with possibilities, presupposition. And lastly, I go back to Heidegger's original question and one possible understanding of why he thinks that the question is, the science Frage is so puzzling. Thank you very much.